On the 7th of July, several interesting stories emerged. Amy Teeble, writing for the Associated Press, reported that the Israeli embassy in London had received a warning of possible terrorist attacks from Scotland Yard, minutes before the bombs exploded. Officials have said Israeli Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not leave his hotel to attend an economic conference because of this warning. On the day of 7/7, Peter Power, the managing director of Visor Consultants, gave an interview to the BBC and ITN. In those interviews, he made abundantly clear that his organisation was running a counter-terrorist training exercise which involved bombs going off simultaneously at different London Underground stations.
Today we were running an exercise for a company, bearing in mind I'm now in the private sector, and we sat everybody down in the city, 1,000 people involved in the whole organisation, but the crisis team. And the most peculiar thing was we based our scenario on the simultaneous attacks on the Underground and mainline station. So we had to suddenly switch an exercise from fictional to real. And one of the first things is, get that bureau number. When you have a list of people missing, tell them. And it took a long time.
Just to get this right, you were actually working today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job, my own company, Visor Consultants. We specialise in helping people to get their crisis management response. How do you jump from slow time thinking to quick time doing? And we chose a scenario with their assistance which is based on a terrorist attack because they're very close to a property occupied by Jewish businessmen. They're in the city, and there are more American banks in the city than there are in the whole of New York. A logical thing to do. And I've still got the...
I was going to say, how extraordinary today must feel for you as it unfolds.
Of all the targets the terrorists could have chosen in London, they apparently elected to attack the same targets as had been envisaged by Visor Consultants in their counter-terrorist training exercise.
It was at 9:30 this morning. We were actually running an exercise for over a company of 1,000 people in London based on simultaneous bombs going off precisely at the railway stations that happened this morning. So I still have the hairs on the back of my legs standing upright.
To get this quite straight, you were running an exercise to see how you would cope with this, and it happened while you were running the exercise?
Precisely. And it was about 9:30 this morning. We'd planned this for a company, and for obvious reasons I don't want to reveal their name, but if they're listening they'll know it. And we had a room full of crisis managers for the first time they met. And so within 5 minutes we made a pretty rapid decision, this is the real one. And so we went through the correct drills of activating crisis management procedures to jump from slow time to quick time thinking and so on.
Peter Power, Visor Consultants at London Underground, have refused to release any more details of this counter-terrorist training exercise. According to the Home Office, during the early hours of the 7th of July, 3 men travelled together by car from Leeds to Luton rail station. A 4th drove from Aylesbury to Luton. These 4 men were then apparently observed moving items between the cars before putting on large rucksacks and proceeding to enter Luton station. The men reportedly got a train which left Luton station at 7:40, arriving at King's Cross Thameslink at 8:23, before heading towards the London Underground, splitting up around 7 minutes later.
We contacted the King's Cross and Luton officials. They let us have the databases for that morning. The train was clearly cancelled, and we then interviewed commuters on the platform. They told us that it wasn't running that day, and we got details of how each of the trains that did run were delayed.
The 3 then allegedly boarded tube trains on separate lines. Mohammed Sadiq Khan is presumed to board a westbound Circle Line train. Jermaine Lindsay, a southbound Piccadilly Line train, and Shazad Tanweer, an eastbound Circle Line train. At 10 to 9 that morning, the 3 men each allegedly set off a bomb at almost exactly the same time. From my experience as a counter-terrorist officer, I have knowledge about the kind and amount of explosives that are used in terrorist attacks. The police have said that all the bombs were placed on the floor of the carriages, but they haven't made clear which side of the floor the bombs were placed on. A number of witnesses have described how they saw metal pushing up into the carriage, which would be consistent with bombs being placed underneath the trains.
They just left Edgware Road station when suddenly they felt they had a massive explosion. And some passengers described how the tiles, the covers on the floor of the train suddenly flew up, raised up.
Witnesses reported seeing flashes and fireballs. Others suffered extreme burns.
These occurrences are not consistent with experiments carried out on TATP. Instead, they are much more consistent with the kind of damage caused by dynamite or military explosive like C4.
The Intelligence and Security Committee stated in May 2006, post-incident forensic analysis has shown that the explosions were caused by homemade organic peroxide-based devices. This is the only detail of the explosives that has been released. No information about the detonators or the specific type of explosive used has been made public.
Felt a burning sensation on my hands, put my hands up to my face. Was on the floor by that point.
I saw a very bright light, sort of orangey yellow light, and what appeared to be silver sort of lines across which was the glass flying through the air.
And rather curiously, there are no reliable witnesses who reported seeing the 4 so-called suicide bombers that day in London. In fact, some people have reported that the police tried to pressure them into saying they had seen these 4 alleged suicide bombers.
According to the official narrative, the police had recovered documents bearing the names of Khan and Tanweer from the bomb site close to Aldgate Station by midnight on the 7th. 2 days later, MI5 told police that Khan had come to their attention in an earlier investigation.
London is the most surveyed city in the world. If the men were really on the tubes that day, then why is there no CCTV coverage of them on the London Underground?
According to the Home Office, Hasib Hussain exited King's Cross Underground onto Euston Road, attempted to contact the other 3 men on his mobile before re-entering the station to go to Boots and WH Smith's, where he may have bought a battery. At 9:06, Hussain reportedly went into McDonald's on Euston Road, spending about 10 minutes there. 3 minutes after that, he was reportedly spotted on Gray's Inn Road, before being possibly identified on a number 91 bus from King's Cross to Euston. The official report assumes that he then switched to the number 30 bus at Euston. At 9:47, a bomb went off on a number 30 bus, which after being diverted had ended up at Tavistock Square.
A red bus, emblematic of the City of London, was where the 4th and final explosion took place, when it exploded outside the British Medical Association in Tavistock Square. In my opinion, the damage is inconsistent with a single peroxide-based device detonating in one place. Unconfirmed reports by Stagecoach employees have suggested that irregular maintenance work took place on the bus in the weeks prior to 7/7. Although almost all London buses have CCTV, the 3 cameras on the bomb bus were not working that day. There has been no official explanation for this. The entire attack should have been caught on traffic cameras, yet no footage has ever been released. It is also important to note that none of the reported survivors have identified Hasib Hussain as the bus bomber.
The official report says Hussain was identified on the 10th of July from a driving licence and other documents recovered from Tavistock Square. The link was then made between these and the missing person report. Police then linked Hussain to Khan and Tanweer, presumably through the Leeds connection. On the 12th of July, a day of several apparent breakthroughs in Operation Thesis, the police announced that they had found documents belonging to 3 men suspected of carrying out the attacks. That day, police searched a number of properties linked to the men in Leeds and Aylesbury. 18 Alexandra Grove in Burley, Leeds, quickly became known as the bomb-making factory. It was later widely reported that the police had discovered a large quantity of explosives in the flat. Although the Home Office report indicated that Khan, Tanweer and Hussain had been linked to the suspected bomb factory at Alexandra Grove by unspecified forensic examination, there is no other evidence currently available to suggest that any of the 4 suspects had access to this property. There is no confirmation that Magdi El-Nashar, the Egyptian chemistry student, rented the flat to the group, as is suggested in the official narrative. To quote the official report, police, working on the theory that there is a King's Cross link to the 3 train bombs, all being broadly equidistant from there at the time of the explosions, identify a CCTV image of 4 men with rucksacks at King's Cross. They recognise Tanweer first from a DVLA photograph. The police identify CCTV images of the same 4 at Luton Station.